Welcome back everybody to another video here at LGT Transport. Today we're going to be going over a drum brake system, disassembly and reassembly, checking all the components, making sure everything's good to go back together okay. Showing you exactly how the mechanism works to apply your brakes and how the mechanism works to loosen or back off your brakes. So let's get into it, and thanks for watching. So to start a brake job, first thing you need to do is actually chock the wheels of the truck. Make sure it's not moving anywhere, because the next step is we have to release the brakes. After we release the brakes, we're going to jack up the axle that you're working on to get the tires into the air so we can remove the tires. We have 1 through 4 in terms of those 4 steps completed already, and then we move on to our next step, which will be removing the drum. Before you can remove the drum, you have to loosen what's called a slack adjuster back here. Once you loosen it, it basically backs the drum shoes away from the drum. So if you think about it like a circle, it's going to pull them in away from the outer shell of the drum. So now that we've done that, we can actually pull this off. You will probably need a steel hammer of some kind to knock loose the drum from the hub surface where it meshes together. They call them, I think, mating surfaces. When you're doing this, remember to always use your legs. Whenever you use your back, it's never a good story. So grip it, pull it off, and you set it down. So when you inspect the drum, you're going to see obvious signs of heat cracking is what they call it. You can see these cracks in here. That is not terrible. You're basically looking for any major cracks that would structurally or reduce the structural integrity of the drum itself. The other thing you want to check is the lip on the outside here. There's a little one on here, but it doesn't seem to be too bad. You're also looking for any grooving in the drum. You can feel that there's some, but we got to the pads in time where the rivets on the pads aren't digging into the drum and creating those grooves, so to speak. So this drum, I think, is actually going to be all right. I don't see any external cracking or any breakage anywhere that's going to cause us any issues, and so we're probably going to go ahead and reuse this drum. So the next step is we have our shoes exposed now. We have a certain tool here called a brake spring tool. I got this from Snap-on, but you can actually, it's a OTC part number. I'll put that in the description down below. It's really handy for pulling off one side of the springs, and then basically from there our shoes will fall off of the brake shoe assembly, so to speak, and then we can show you the inner workings of the S-cam and the rollers. So now that we have our shoe exposed, we've got 2 springs we're going to be taking off here. There's the tool that I showed earlier. There's a little, I'm going to call it a poker because I don't know the actual term for it, but you're going to put it in this little gap down here. And when you put it in that gap, you want to get it nice and tight. And then all you're going to do is basically push down on it. See how the spring came loose? And that's it. Then we're going to do it on the other side. Yeah, the spring is actually up top here. So we got both these springs off here now. And basically, all you do is you lift up, and you need to lift this part and kick it over the top. We're going to lift this up. You lift that up, and you just let the shoes drop. And now we have the entire brake system dismantled at the moment. The only thing we really haven't gone into is the S-cams in here. But we'll do some close-up shots of exactly how that works and how the rollers and all fit together when we reassemble. Okay, so down here you've got the brake can attached to the slack adjuster through what they call the pin and the clevis here. Okay, there's a pin that goes through what this is called as the clevis. That attaches through a spine tooth gear to the S-cam tube here and to the S-cam itself. Now the S-cam itself is actually what applies your brakes. So as you can see here, it's in the shape of an S. And what it does is it spins. I can't really show the full motion of it, but you can see it's rocking back and forth. That will spin, and you have 2 rollers here, which as it spins will then shoot up on top of these parts here, pushing the brakes into the drum. And that's how you apply your brakes. Now, the rollers here, which means that's the side where the shoes are put together. But on this side you have the 2 anchor pins, or I'm sorry, the anchor pin itself that holds this side of the shoe up top, and the same with the one down below. So one thing you do want to test while you're here is your S-cam play. If you did have any play in the S-cam, now you can't see it in the video here, but if you remember earlier when I was describing the S-cam, it's the part that's in the shape of an S, and it fits through a bracket on the back here, as well as a bracket that's tied to the frame, and then of course goes into your slack adjuster. If you have any play in it at all, which this one has very minimal, then you should be good to go. But if you notice excess play, then you need to worry about changing the S-cams and the S-cam tubes. But you would have to disassemble it to really tell if the S-cam is bad or if it's just the tube and the brackets. So the other thing that we'll check is basically our anchor pin. We want to make sure that it's not too worn out from where the shoes were sitting on the anchor pin. Generally, sometimes brake clean will get them clean, but most of the time you got to take a wire wheel to them, clean them off, and then see the condition of them. That's going to be basically, I mean, it's metal on metal, so you're looking for any grooving. That's going to cause an issue with the shoe sitting back on top of that anchor pin. This one looks fairly good, but I'll need to know for sure by cleaning it off with the wire wheel. Here we have the ABS toner ring. And as you can see, it's right around the hub. And if you go down here, you've got the ABS wheel speed sensor. This together combines to give you the data input for wheel speed that allows your ABS system to work, in icy conditions or wet conditions when the wheel slips and it needs to lock up the brakes. And I don't know what this is, but it's actuating is the word. And it's actuating the air supply to then apply these brakes, a couple, I would say at least, maybe a dozen times in a second or something like that if it's trying to keep the wheel from actually locking up and slow the vehicle down, right? But this toner ring is very important, so whenever you do a brake job, what I like to do is check the condition of it and then take a wire brush all the way around and make sure these little slots are entirely visible, because if they're not visible, you're not going to get the wheel speed to the sensor that you need. So as you can see here, we did a little bit of cleanup. To be honest, with how much dust goes through this system, we're not necessarily looking for perfection, but we do want to make sure that certain things are cleaned up along the way. Main things you want attention to are going to be your S-cam, your anchor pins, and your ABS wheel toner ring. Otherwise, if you want to spend a little bit of time doing it, you can. But we're basically in the right stage to put everything back together. So we've got our new shoes here. Obviously, you can tell just a little bit of a difference. There's a little bit thicker shoe here than here. What you can also see is this one's actually right at the wear bar to where they're really needing replaced. So basically these were on their last leg. And then here, if you see, you've got a little bit of a raised edge going across here. That's your wear bar on this one, right? Now on these particular trucks we have, it's a Peterbilt 579. They take a 4709 shoe, and that's the code for it. A lot of our trailers, they'll take like a, I think 4515 or a, I think it's maybe a 4705, but I might be wrong on that. There's definitely a lot of literature that we'll probably put in the notes, so you can read through that, learn a little bit more about brake systems in terms of specifications and things like that. So, but now we're going to go ahead and take these and put them together with the spring kit and install them on the axle itself. So now what we're going to do, the first step that I usually like to do is I put the rollers into the shoe itself. You can see that there's two different edges here, okay? And so the roller is going to fit in the smaller of the two, and it'll fit right into the groove slotted down. You saw me put this little spring gadget on there. That is to hold the roller onto the shoe, and you probably want to put that in first, because what it does is it snaps just like that into these holes, and that's what holds the roller in place. Okay, so that's one shoe. Here's the other one, and I should say there are two shoes to each axle, just in case nobody saw that. I thought I should put it out there just in case. But you get it popped in there. Now everything's in place. Next step is going to be your big In these cases it's a green spring, but it's a single spring that has a rod in between them. Let's see if I can show you exactly. It's got a little beveled end on it, so it locks out in the spring. These connect on the back side of these to this little deal in here. Okay, so you loop that in there like that, and then you take the other one. This is going to be the hard part, because you have to connect them to make them work. So you can see here that you've got your green spring attached to the first one. What I'm probably going to do, and we'll see if this works out, it's always kind of a process, but you lock it on. You can see that's where you need that to be, and then your spring is going to go down in between here. All right, so putting these shoes back together is probably going to be the biggest task of all. I am a firm believer that disassembly is always a little bit easier to do, because you're not really worried as much about the parts as you are when you're putting them back on. So when you're putting the shoes back on, the easiest way to do it is you're going to loosen your slack adjuster to allow the S-cam to roll over, in order for the rollers that we put on earlier to fit in the groove of the S-cam. That'll give you the most reach with your internal spring. And then once you get it swung around, you're going to put in your external springs. You got 2 of them, and that's where this specialty tool comes into play. This tool is going to be a lifesaver when it comes to these orange springs, because you can use it. It's got a special design that allows you to put leverage onto the axle itself. Once you get the spring in the holes, sometimes you can pop it in with the tool. Otherwise, you might need to get other little methods of persuasion. Sometimes even a small hammer is the best way to tap them in, because you want the hook obviously to go all the way through. Otherwise, you have a spring that's sitting there doing nothing. But that is what it should look like once reassembled. The last step is going to be putting the brake drum back on and adjusting the brakes back up to spec. And we are finished with that axle for a brake job. All right, so now we got our brake drum back. We're going to lift it up, and it'll be kind of tricky, but basically we're going to lift it up, put it back over the studs, and slide it back over the brake shoes. And then once it's nice and tight against the hub surface here, we're basically ready to adjust the brakes back up, put the wheels back on, and go from there. All right, that wraps up another maintenance video here at LGT Transport. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions on what we covered today, please leave a comment down below, and we'll work to get back to you on that with an answer. We have many social media platforms going up, including Facebook, Instagram, as well as a new podcast called Driver Stories. Go ahead and give that a listen to, and to let us know what you think. Otherwise, stay tuned. We have more maintenance videos coming up every month. Stay tuned for more. Thank you very much.